Ladies and gentlemen, meet my daughter. A total waste of good genetics. The words crackle through the ballroom speakers, sharp and amused, slicing straight through the soft swell of the string quartet. Conversations die mid-laugh. Crystal glasses pause inches from lips. 300 faces pivot toward the stage at once. My father smiles, soaking it in. The room smells like polished marble, imported lilies, and money. Old money, loud money, the kind that funds a $25 million gala without blinking. Chateau Margaux flows freely. Diamonds flash under chandeliers older than most marriages in the room. My father taps the wireless microphone, amused by the echo of his own authority. She had every advantage. He continues, pacing the stage like a performer who knows his audience. Private schools, tutors, connections. And what does she do with it? He chuckles, shaking his head. She crawls around in filth, taking care of society's garbage. Laughter ripples outward, polite at first, then louder, safer when others join. She calls it a career, he adds, leaning closer to the mic. I call it a failure with a savior complex. More laughter. Someone claps. I stand near the back of the room, half hidden behind a marble column, the applause buzzing in my ears like static. I don't move. I don't flinch. From a distance I probably look small, insignificant, exactly how he wants me framed. He lifts his glass in a mock toast. To ambition, he says. May yours amount to more than this. Applause again. Warmer this time. They think it's humor. A rich man teasing his disappointing daughter. A harmless roast served alongside $500 a plate dinners. They don't see what's happening. They definitely don't know that 30 seconds from now, this $25 million gala will become a federal crime scene. The first sound is my heels sharp, deliberate, echoing. Click. 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 The marble floor carries the noise farther than I expect. Heads begin to turn. Conversations fade, one by one, like dimmed lights. The orchestra falters, unsure whether to keep playing. My father notices the shift and squints toward the sound. He smiles wider, already preparing for what he assumes is coming. A tantrum. Tearful plea. A public embarrassment he can laugh off later. I step fully into the light, black dress. Minimal jewelry. A slim black folder tucked under my arm. The room goes still. I walk straight toward the stage. Each step measured. And hurried. The kind of walk you take when you already know how something ends. My father lowers the microphone slightly, brows knitting together. Confusion flickers across his face, quickly masked by irritation. I reach him. Extend my hand. May I? I ask softly, for the first time all night. He hesitates then, because he always believes he's in control. He hands me the microphone. The weight of it settles into my palm. The room holds its breath. I do work with the state's most vulnerable populations, I say, my voice steady as silk. That part was accurate. I let the words sit. Let them echo. But my father forgot to mention my job title. Was. Just long enough to feel uncomfortable. I am the senior program officer for the State Health Infrastructure Fund. A ripple moves through the crowd. Subtle. Curious. And I am the sole signatory with veto power over discretionary grants exceeding $10 million. My father's smile collapses. I also happen to be the person responsible for approving or denying the $25 million grant Dr. Marcus has been begging for since January. Silence slams into the room. Someone gasps. A man near the front drops his glass. It hits the marble and explodes, red wine splashing outward, bleeding across the white floor like an open wound. My father's face drains of color, turning ash gray beneath the stage lights. I glance down at the black folder in my hand. And that, I say quietly, is just the beginning. I look back up at the frozen crowd. Have you ever been humiliated by your own family? I let my eyes sweep the room. I just want to know I'm not alone. The folder opens. And everything changes. The black folder opens with a soft, deliberate sound. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Prepared. The crowd leans forward without realizing it. Curiosity replaces shock. Donors, trustees, board members, People who fund buildings and buy naming rights suddenly understand this isn't a tantrum. It's a presentation. I glance down at the first page, then back up at my father. Let's talk about this proposal, I say calmly. Shall we? He doesn't answer. His mouth opens slightly, then closes again. No sound comes out. I turn toward the front row, the men and women in tailored suits, jeweled watches catching the stage lights, the ones who'd written checks tonight because his name promised prestige. You were told, I continue, that your money would fund a state-of-the-art transitional medical facility for the unhoused. I flip the page. The sound is sharp in the silence, like a gunshot. 80% of the proposed budget, I read, is allocated to imported Italian leather furniture, custom marble flooring, and designer lighting fixtures. A murmur spreads. Confusion. Discomfort. $0, I add, eyes up now, are allocated for patient beds. A woman in the front row stiffens. A man beside her frowns, checking the program as if it might contradict me. This, I say, tapping the page with one finger, is not charity. It's interior design. My father sways slightly. One hand grips the edge of the podium like it's the only solid thing left in his world. I turn another page, crack. $300,000, I continue, earmarked for transportation services. I look directly at a donor I recognize, someone who just pledged 6 figures. That transportation, I clarify, consists of 2 luxury SUVs, fully loaded, leather seats, personal use. A sharp inhale ripples through the room, and my father's face glistens now. Sweat at his temples. His lips move, forming words that never arrive. He looks like a fish pulled from water, gasping, eyes wide, only just realizing the oxygen is gone. Another page, crack. Here, I say, voice still even, we have administrative bonuses paid in advance. Not contingent on project completion. Not contingent on patient intake. I pause. Paid regardless of whether a single homeless person ever receives care. Someone mutters, Jesus. I let the silence do the rest. This isn't a medical facility, I say finally. It's a retirement plan disguised as charity. My father tries to speak. The microphone squeals as his shaking hand brushes it. No, he croaks. This is being taken out of. I lift one finger, he stops. I turn to the final page. And because this is a state grant, I say, slipping seamlessly into professional cadence, the consequences are not emotional. They are procedural. I straighten the page. Dr. Marcus's application is hereby formally rejected due to gross financial mismanagement, misrepresentation, and attempted fraud. The words hang in the air like a verdict. This decision, I continue, will be documented, audited, and circulated. I look directly at him now. You will never see a single dollar of state funding, I say quietly. As long as I hold a pen. Sound escapes him. Something small. Broken. I close the folder. The microphone slips from my hand. IT hits the marble floor with a heavy thud, the impact booming through the speakers, echoing through the ballroom like a final gavel strike. No applause. No laughter. Just stunned, irrevocable silence. That I turn and walk away. That I don't look back at my father. I don't look back at the donors scrambling for explanations. I don't look back at the stage that once belonged entirely to him. For 29 years, I had been the invisible girl, the disappointment, the punchline, but tonight, under the lights he paid for with money he didn't have, I was the only thing everyone could see, and behind me, his empire was already collapsing. People think moments like that are born from rage. They're wrong. They're born from patience. 10 years earlier, I stood in my father's mahogany library, the air thick with leather bindings and entitlement, holding a letter that felt heavier than gold. Acceptance. Full scholarship. One of the top social work programs in the country. My hands were shaking, not from fear but hope. I got in, I said, smiling before I could stop myself. They want me to start in the fall. He didn't even look up at first. Just reached out, took the letter from my hands like it offended him. Scanned it once. Then he laughed, not loud. Not angry. Worse. Amused. You want to be a janitor for human refuse? He asked, folding the paper in half. After everything I gave you. Before I could speak, he walked to the fireplace. The flames were already lit. He dropped the letter and I watched my future curl and blacken, the ink disappearing first like it had never existed at all. If you walk out that door, he said calmly, watching it burn, you are dead to me. I opened my mouth, closed it, picked up my bag. I won't pay for this, he added. I won't speak your name. You will not exist in my world. And just like that, I didn't doubt he cut me off completely. No money, no calls, no holidays. When people asked about his daughter, he'd shrug and change the subject. Sometimes, if he was feeling generous, he'd use me as a joke. My kid wanted to save the world, he'd say. I told her the world doesn't need saving. It needs better surgeons. But here's what he never understood. Fire doesn't just destroy things, it forges them. While he built an empire of plastic surgery clinics and vanity projects, I worked double shifts. Hospitals by day, community shelters by night. I slept in a studio apartment where the heat worked only when it felt like it. Dinner was ramen. Motivation was spite. I went to night school. Earned my master's in public administration. Learned budgets, compliance, oversight. Learned where money disappeared, and how to follow it when it did. That I rose quietly. Caseworker. District manager. State board liaison. No headlines. No galas. Just results. And through all of it he never knew that he never asked to him I was a ghost. A failure he occasionally referenced when he needed a laugh. A name he refused to say out loud. That was his fatal flaw. He mistook silence for stagnation. The man gripping the podium tonight, knuckles white, staring at me like I'd broken into his house. That man doesn't recognize the woman standing under those lights. He only sees the girl he threw away. I, on the other hand, see him clearly. I saw him 6 months ago too, though he didn't know it then either. His grant application landed on my desk on a Tuesday afternoon. I recognized the language immediately. Inflated costs, shell vendors, money looped back into consulting fees, and administrative expenses. I didn't even have to dig. It was sloppy. Arrogant. I could have rejected it quietly. Sent a polite email. Cited compliance issues. Let him rage in private and move on to the next con. But that wouldn't have been justice. Justice requires witnesses. Justice requires light. He wanted a stage. He wanted applause. He wanted his name etched into marble and memory, so I gave him exactly what he asked for. Tonight wasn't revenge born of anger. It was the end of a 10-year plan built by a woman he thought had burned away. He was wronged. I wasn't destroyed. I was forged. People kept asking me later if I'd planned it, if it had been spontaneous. Emotional. A daughter finally snapping under the weight of humiliation. I let them believe that. The truth was quieter. Colder. If I had rejected his application the normal way. An email, a formal notice, a bureaucratic stamp. He would have done what men like him always do. He would have spun a story, blamed politics, claimed corruption, told donors the state didn't understand vision. He would have found another patron, another loophole, another way to keep the house of cards standing. That wasn't enough. I didn't want to wound him. I needed to cut the head off the snake, so I waited. I approved the preliminary reviews, signed off on the early compliance checks, let his confidence swell with every green light, watched his tone change in emails. From careful to smug. From deferential to entitled. He thought he'd already won. I watched him book the Grand Hotel. Watched the invoices roll in for lobster tails and vintage wine. Watched him design invitations heavy with gold embossing and self-importance. He spared no expense. Why would he? In his mind, the money was already his. And then I waited for the final piece. Not the paperwork. The people. I needed every important person in the city in one room. Every donor who trusted him. Every board member who validated his ego. Every witness who mattered. He gathered them for me. That was the beauty of it. You didn't just build a gala, Dad, I thought as I stood on that stage, watching his world freeze. You built a trap. And then I watched him walk straight into it. He mistook my silence over the years for submission. It never was. It was the silence of a hunter, waiting for the target to get comfortable enough to stop checking the exits. He wanted a show, so I gave him one. When I leaned in close, just before I walked away, I lowered my voice. I hope the lobster was worth it, I whispered. Just loud enough for him to hear. The silence in the room shifted after that. It wasn't heavy anymore, it was electric. For the first time in my life, the air didn't smell like his expensive cologne. Sharp, overpowering, inescapable, it smelled clean, cold like justice. I pushed through the service doors behind the stage, my pace measured. Not rush. Not triumphant. The walk of someone who had just finished a job and didn't need to watch the aftermath to know how it would end. I wanted my car. I wanted quiet. I wanted the end of a long, ugly chapter. But as the door swung shut behind me, I knew something else too. Monsters don't just die because you cut off their food supply. They thrash, they lash out, and somewhere behind me, in a ballroom full of shattered illusions and bleeding red wine, my father was realizing that for the first time in his life. He had no control left. And that realization, that was only the beginning. The service door didn't open behind me, it collided. Metal slammed against concrete so hard the frame rattled, the echo cracking down the narrow corridor like a gunshot. You stop right there. The voice wasn't polished anymore. No charm. No practiced authority. It was raw, wet with rage, scraped straight from the back of his throat. I stopped, turned slowly. He was 10 feet away. The tuxedo he'd worn like armor was rumpled now, jacket crooked, bow tie half undone. Sweat soaked the collar. His face was a mottled map of red fury and shining moisture, veins standing out along his neck like cords pulled too tight. This wasn't the celebrated surgeon. This was a cornered animal. You think you can just walk away? He snarled, taking a step closer. After what you did. Another step. You think you can come into my house in front of my peers and humiliate me? Then he lunged, his hand closed around my wrist, fingers digging in hard enough that pain bloomed white-hot under the skin. Bruises would form there by morning, purple fingerprints shaped like ownership. I didn't pull away. I looked at him, not with fear. Not with anger, with absolute clinical detachment. Let go, I said. He laughed, a sharp, broken sound. Or what? His breath hit my face, sour and stale with red wine and entitlement. You'll write another report. His grip tightened. I gave you life, he hissed. I put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me. By destroying my reputation. In that moment, everything finally made sense. For years, I'd thought he hated my career because it didn't make money. Because it didn't elevate him. Because it embarrassed him in front of his friends. That wasn't it. This was never about money. It was about hierarchy. In his mind, he was the sun. And I was a moon, meant to reflect his light or fade quietly into darkness. But tonight, the moon had eclipsed the sun. The waste of good genetics had exercised power over the genius. The janitor of human refuse had audited the surgeon. The babysitter had fired the king. And the injury that realization caused ran so deep it fractured his reality. He wasn't angry because he was broke. He was angry because I had proven I was stronger. He couldn't process a world where his victim was now his judge. I didn't destroy your reputation, Dad, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. His face contorted. He shook my arm, spit flying as he shouted. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I know? His voice rose, cracking. I'll bury you. I'll sue you for defamation. I'll end your career. His eyes were wild now. You'll be begging on the streets with the junkies you love so much. That was when I wrenched free. He stumbled back a step, surprised. Not by the force, but by the fact that I resisted it all. I didn't retreat. I stepped forward, closed the distance, backed him into the wall. The concrete met his shoulders with a dull thud. For the first time in my life, I was standing in his space, and he felt it. His breath hitched. His eyes flicked sideways, searching for exits that weren't there. The predator recalculated and found himself measured. This ends now, I said quietly. His chest heaved. You think this is over, he spat. I know where your grandmother is. The words dropped heavy between us. She's comfortable, he continued, voice lowering into something colder. Nice nursing home. Expensive. Would be a shame if her funding got complicated. There it was. The final mask off. I studied him for a long second. Then I smiled. Thank you, I said, for saying that out loud. Confusion flickered across his face. You just threatened a vulnerable elder, I continued evenly. On camera. His eyes darted up, red lights blinked softly in the hallway corners, security cameras. You've had too much to drink, he started. I've already sent the footage, I said. Along with the audit. And the grant documents. And your texts. His mouth opened, closed. Any further contact, I added, goes straight to law enforcement. Silence swallowed him. The animal retreated behind the glass of calculation. But it was too late. I stepped back. He slid down the wall slightly, suddenly looking very old. Very small. I turned and walked away behind me. His breathing sounded broken ahead of me. The night air waited, cool, clean and free, and for the first time, I knew something with absolute certainty. He had no leverage left, and I had never been safer. He straightened slowly, breath ragged, eyes burning with something close to triumph. You think you're smart, he said hoarsely. You think you can take my money and walk away? His hand slid into his jacket pocket. I still have something you care about. The words landed like a punch, that a cold knot formed low in my stomach. He pulled out his phone and tilted the screen toward me, a wet, slick grin spreading across his face, the smile he used when he thought he'd found leverage. Let's see how much you love your grandmother, he murmured, when she's sleeping on a park bench tonight. He lowered the phone slowly, deliberately, letting the threat hang in the air like smoke. This was the button he'd always used. Fear. Family. Guilt. He expected me to break. Instead, he kept talking. I have resources, he said, voice growing steadier as his confidence returned. I have power. He laughed, an ugly, jagged sound, and reached for a bottle of Chateau Margaux still sitting on the service cart nearby. He lifted it, admiring the label. $2,000 a bottle, he said. You know what that means. He took a long sip. It means I live in a world you don't understand. Have a black fund, darling. A rainy day reserve you and your little bureaucrats can't touch. Another swallow. Red wine stained his white cuff. I can write off $100,000 party as donor cultivation, he continued. I can fly to Paris on research trips. I can move money where I want, when I want. He leaned closer, eyes locked on mine. The rules are suggestions. Money is the only law. A beat. You can't hurt me, he said softly. I am the institution. I didn't blink that I reached into my bag and took out my phone. Tapped the screen 3 times. Then I held it up between us. The high-resolution photos filled the display. Catering invoices. The wine list. Consulting fees routed through a shell company bearing his own name. Line after line of numbers he'd assumed no one would ever connect. You're right, Dad, I said calmly. You are the institution. I swiped. And that's exactly why you're going to prison. His smile faltered. It's called self-dealing, I continued, voice precise now, professional. Under IRS Code 4941, it's strictly prohibited for a private foundation manager to use charitable assets for personal benefit. Another swipe. No luxury dinners. No vintage wine. No donor cultivation galas. I paused, watching the color drain from his face. You just admitted, boasted actually, that you used foundation money to pay for this night. His hand trembled. Wine sloshed, staining the floor red. That's tax fraud, I said evenly. It's embezzlement. And when you combine it with the inflated construction contracts I found in your grant proposal, I met his eyes. It becomes a RICO case. He stared at the phone as if it were a weapon. You wouldn't, he whispered. I already did. I turned the screen so he could see the upload confirmation. 30 seconds ago, I said. While you were bragging about your black fund, I sent all of it to a secure server shared with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. His knees buckled slightly. This isn't a party anymore, Dad, I finished. It's a crime scene. And you just gave me the confession. 400 words. He lunged for one last card. I'll stop paying for her care tonight, he spat. Shady Pines. Let's see how fast they throw her out. Call them, I said. Speaker phone. He dialed. The line rang once. Then disconnected. Confusion crept across his face. She's not there, I said gently. I moved her last Tuesday. The Kensington. 1 year paid up front. His world collapsed. You never saw me, I continued. You were too busy admiring your own reflection. I turned my phone toward him. Call in progress, the screen read. Special Agent Miller, IRS Criminal Investigation. He's been listening for the last 3 minutes. The phone slipped from his hand. IT was over. I walked down the service hallway as federal agents surged past me. Behind me there were shouts, sirens, the small panicked voice of a man finally introduced to gravity. Outside, the air smelled like rain. I got into my modest car, not luxury, not spectacle, and closed the door. I called my grandmother. It's done, I said. And him, she whispered. He can't hurt us anymore. I drove away without looking back. Not joyful, relieved, like the ache after cutting out a tumor. People like him think power makes them untouchable. But truth always lands. And if someone is treating you like you're invisible, let them. Ghosts walk through walls. Ghosts see everything. And by the time they notice you, the checkmate is already set. Sometimes being overlooked is your greatest advantage.